All right, welcome to the Becoming Great podcast, a podcast where me and Eric Bergman, the founder of Great, discuss how to become great people and how to build a great organization, Great.com, that will give away 100% of its profits to charity. Eric, what's going on?
Life is good. Life is good. I'm tingling in my toes. I'm jumping around. I was tired like 30 minutes ago. Then I started talking to you about this. And now I feel like a 1-year-old who just ate a buttload of candy.
Sounds good. Now, today's episode, we're going to talk about strategy because in the last episode, we talked about Great's vision for moving forward. And if you haven't checked that out, I would suggest that you start with episode number 32, Vision. And today we're going to talk about the strategy to complete this vision. So what is the difference between a vision and a strategy?
Okay, so the vision we described in the previous episode was a grand vision. So you can imagine that vision is like this big castle that you can see in a Disney movie, this really fancy castle. Now, imagine that you ordered that castle from IKEA and you're supposed to put it back together. And you have this long catalog with instructions. You need to do this and you need to be 2 people building it together, so it's fun. And so if the castle, that's the vision, like that's where you want to go to, then the strategy is the IKEA catalog with the instructions of how to actually get there. So without the IKEA catalog, it's like, well, there is no way we're going to be able to build this thing. But with that, it's suddenly quite simple as long as you follow the instructions.
Man, I wasn't prepared for this metaphor. I have some bad associations with IKEA furniture. The trick is to get someone in that knows what they're doing. And that is kind of what we did this weekend. We had a workshop with Joachim, our new head of product, is his title,
yes.
Right? Yeah. So would you explain what he did in this workshop?
Okay, so we started with building this vision, creating this vision. Okay, we want to create this castle. And then we didn't know really, okay, what's the strategy of getting there? How do we determine what tasks to do to get there? And Joachim's a great workshop with us that I really enjoyed, which was, well, if you imagine a cross in front of you, then at the top of this, scale, the Y scale or whatever it's called, is the biggest impact tasks, the things that we can do that will have the most probability of helping us to get to our goals. And further down on this, we will have the least impact tasks. And then from left to right on this cross, we have the things that takes the most time and the hardest to do on the right side. And on the left side, we have the easiest tasks to do. So things that takes the least amount of time. And then we started asking ourselves, okay, what tasks can we come up with to do and what tasks are we doing? So for example, one task was running this podcast. And then we asked ourselves, okay, how much impact does this have when it comes to reaching our goals and how much time does it take? And this ended up somewhere in the middle of the scale. Took quite a lot of time and didn't have that much of an impact. And then we kind of took all the tasks around that, whatever that could be, and we tried to figure out, is this something that takes a lot of time compared to how much impact it can have? And from there, we started building.
Right. So we first did a brainstorming exercise where we came up with everything that we could be doing that we're not currently doing. And then we also listed all the things that we are currently doing. And then we graded them on impact and how difficult it is to kind of get an idea of how to prioritize tasks.
Yeah, so we came up with all kinds of tasks, things we want to do and things we didn't want to do. Basically wanting to get to a place to find out which of these tasks are the most efficient ones and the easiest ones to do. And then those are the tasks to pursue. Those are the tasks that should go into the strategy.
So I think it's interesting to discuss what kind of tasks we decided to do because of these workshops. But to understand why we did that, I think we need to discuss. So what is the goal with our strategy? Because we use this to set some goals along the way to the mission.
Yeah,
We talked about the goals that we have set.
Yes, an interesting thing that differentiates a strategy from a vision as well could be the time frame. So our vision is very, very long term, and a strategy could be divided up in shorter terms. So the first important part of our strategy became we want to reach the milestone of being break even, meaning that we're having as much revenues as we have costs in any given month by August next year. And at the moment,
2020.
Yeah, 2020. And at the moment, we have costs of about 25, 30,000 euros each month, and we have zero revenues. Nada, not a single dime in. So to get to a point where it's break even is quite far. And before, I've been thinking mainly in a very long-term perspective, but this became like a strategy shift, like, okay, if we should actually start growing up and turning this into a real business, then break even should be something we're aiming for first. So that became the short-term goal. Okay, we want to be break even by this point. And we said that to get there, we're probably going to need to have revenues of 50,000 euros each month, because our costs are probably going to go up by then with some more people and some other things happening.
So you mentioned in the previous episode about the vision that one of the things we want to do with Great is to minimize the risks that we are taking. So how much of this break-even point would you say is because we want to minimize risk before we scale up? And how much would you say would be for it to feel good about you? I guess you don't want to put in unlimited money in this project. Or what is the main reason we want to reach a break-even point, would you say?
So risk is definitely one thing. Me not wanting to put more money into this is another. I think the main one is to actually start feeling that we're on the right direction. So we're not just wincing around. Imagine that we're gonna climb up this pyramid of Giza, and you need to take the first real step up this climbing these steps up. And before we actually start having revenues and start reaching some milestones, it's like we might be going around the pyramid a lot, we might be thinking a lot of things, but at the end of the day, our vision needs us to take us to the top.
So we need some proof of concept and also something to evaluate, I guess.
Yeah, to feel that it's actually start happening. And I think I need that, and I believe that everyone in the team needs that as well, to feel like, okay, this is a real thing, this is something that's gonna happen. We're actually on the way up to the top. We're not just walking around. Right.
So we have set one financial goal to reach revenue of about 50,000 euros a month before August 2020. What other goals did we set?
So we also set the goal that we want 50,000 people looking at the things that we're doing by August next year. So basically, people listening to this podcast or following us on Instagram or being regularly in newspapers where we get that kind of exposure. So the reason with this podcast is basically, well, there's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons are that we want people to be aware of this project. We want to use this to recruit. We want to use this to spread knowledge. We want to use this for many things. So to actually start scaling this podcast up and having people listening to it and all the other things that we're doing.
Right. So why is the main reason we want to have people watch this material? Is it to make money in the end, or is it to inspire?
If I could only choose one of those two, I would choose make money. So we want to inspire, we want to have an impact in many things that we're doing, but our main mission with Great as an organization is to generate profits and give it away. So if I could only use this podcast for one thing, now obviously we want to use it for plenty of things, but then it would be for the one way or another benefit the business idea and making money from it.
Right. So you're saying the goal to reach the revenues is more important than the goal of reaching the viewers?
They kind of tie together, but the viewers are supposed to help the revenues rather than the other way around. So if I had to choose one of them, I would choose revenue goals. I think that's by far the hardest one as well. But the long-term thing is that they should tie in together and make an equal impact together.
And on a 2-year horizon, what kind of goals do we set then?
So on a 2-year horizon, we want to reach to a point where we have donated a total of 1 million euros to the environment. So right now we're focusing on environmental causes. So that means that we need to make profits of a total of 1 million euros before August 2021, which is a tough goal to beat. That means that we need to reach revenues of, I don't know, maybe 200,000 euros by then, which is, well, a lot more than the 0 we have today and a very challenging goal to reach to. But that's
and
where
probably a lot more than that, since we will make less in the beginning.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really hard. That's for sure. But we're shooting for the stars here, and worst case scenario, we don't reach it, but hopefully we reach the sky.
All right. So right now we're making 0 a month, and in a year we want to reach 50,000 a month. And in 2 years, we want to have reached 1 million total in profit that we can donate.
Yeah.
How realistic would you say those goals are?
So before the strategy workshop, when I started looking at where we were, I felt like, yeah, we're going to figure this out. And then we set these goals and like started looking at what are we doing. It's like, fuck, we're not going in the right direction here. We're missing out on a lot of things that we need to do to make money. For example, we focused a lot on learning things that could be beneficial in a maybe 5-year perspective, but not in a 1-year perspective. We focused on, we did a lot of things with this podcast, for example, that's not going to drive revenues. That's going to be tricky to deal with. So I think the most interesting thing for me was that wake-up call. It's like, hey, Eric, you need to look here because we need these kind of things in the strategy to hit those 1-year targets.
So let's go back to that one. What we decide to do differently. But for now, what is the 2-year goal when it comes to our way of influencing people watching us?
So in 2 years' time, we want 1 million people watching the things that we're doing on a monthly basis. And that could mean listen to this podcast and the things we're doing here, but following us on Instagram. But it could also be us being guests in various TV shows or newspaper articles or anywhere, basically. We want to have 1 million pair of eyes looking at things that we're doing on a monthly basis. And to go back to your question, how realistic are these things? Well, I think they're doable, but they're really hard. It's going to be a big challenge. It's basically saying how realistic is it that the Greek football team would win the European Football Cup, which they have done, and it was unlikely, but it's completely doable. We need some luck. We need to have hard work, but it's completely doable.
Right. To me, the workshop felt, okay, so in 2 years' time, we're going to have made 1 million euros to donate away, and we're going to have 1 million viewers per month. And to me, that was kind of like, okay, let's say I decide that I'm going to climb Mount Everest. That means that I have to make a lot of lifestyle changes, right? I need to start training way more. I need to do probably a lot of things. And I need to change my life, basically. And that was kind of how I felt after this workshop, in a good way. It was a wake-up call, like you said. I can't keep living my life this way if I'm going to reach Mount Everest. So what did you realize from the workshop that Great needs to do differently that we're not doing today?
So the biggest change was thinking more about the short term than the long term and breaking it down to, okay, how do we start market what we're doing today? So focusing on getting the product up and running in a far better way than it is right now, which haven't been a top priority of my time. So get a lot more involved with the product development and making sure that that's up and running sooner rather than later.
And if you want to know what the product is, I should recommend that you check out the episode called Great in 30 Minutes.
Yeah, it's number 32. No, 23. Look around. You'll find 32, 23, same numbers. And secondly, focus a lot on the search part of this. How do you get ranking high up in Google? And a big part of that is how do you get links pointing towards us and publicity in general, which was something that I barely focused at all on up until this point. And it's one of my biggest passions. I really like that part of this. And it became a wake-up call looking at this strategy. It's like, okay, Eric, to reach this goal, the break-even goal within a year, we need this much links and publicity, basically. And we're nowhere near that. So we need to get a big part of our focus on getting links and publicity. And that became a wake-up call for me saying, okay, let's focus on doing these kinds of things with a podcast. Let's focus on getting these kinds of interviews done. Let's focus on getting these kinds of newspapers actually being interested in what we're doing and talking to these kinds of blogs. So we start this wheel spinning in a sense that if that's not focused on, then this is never going to happen.
Right. It's getting time to wrap this part of the conversation up. Is there something you want to add on what you took with you from our latest strategy update and workshop?
Well, just the importance of checking in and sitting down once in a while with where do we want to go, and are we actually living in a way that that's going to happen? And that could translate into, okay, I want to be in great shape in 1 year's time. Okay, do I actually put any time and effort into that? And if not, I'm not going to get in great shape in 1 year's time if I'm not doing that. Or in 5 years' time, I want to have my own business. Okay, am I doing anything to get there? And no. And to me, this was a similar wake-up call, like, okay, in 1 year's time, I want us to break even. And it's like, okay, how much are we actually focusing on making profits and driving revenue? It's like barely at all.
What would you think the consequences, because I think this is something someone can learn from either having a personal goal or if you're running your own business. What would you think the consequences would have been of not having this strategy workshop and just keep doing what we did?
So I think 6 months from now, maybe we would have come to the same conclusion, like, oh crap, we missed this. We need to rethink things. And we would probably have a similar workshop or anything like that then. And I think we would have been aware of that that's not going to happen, and we would probably have changed it then. But I think that would also mean that we would need to have somewhat of a short-term thinking. So without the short-term thinking, I think it would take a long time before we got the ball rolling and even started moving towards the long-term goals. I think we would have lost time, but we would have been aware of it. I think a very common thing, if we take training and getting in shape or starting your own business, for example, is that you never get to the point where you start reflecting on this and that you actually missed out on 6 months or a year or whatever, unless you sit down and do this. So in our organization, there would be a point where I would say, shit, I put in way too much money in this and we haven't focused on getting it back. But in life, there is not a similar situation. Well, it could be why I got way too fat now, or, oh God, I really hate my job. But then you would need to get to that point when basically hitting rock bottom before you start thinking about the changes.
And that doesn't seem like the most smooth way to go about doing it. So
it's a shitty way.
Yeah, so I think this highlights the importance of strategy.
Yeah.
And is there some final thought before we wrap this up?
No, I'm good there.
All right. If you have any further questions about the strategy or any suggestions for topics for the podcast or improvements, please send us an email to podcast@great.com, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.